Agency owners have a ton to think about every single day, from serving clients to growing the business, leading the team, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's the back office grind. Things like reconciling commissions, payroll, tax prep, HR compliance, blah, blah, blah. It's all necessary, but incredibly time consuming. That's where our friends and partners over at Agency Point come in to help. Agency Point specializes in all the details agencies can't afford to ignore: accounting, tax, HR, and legal. They can even handle commission reconciliation so that nothing slips through the cracks. And if you've heard us talk, you know that this is one of the most important things that agencies must do. By managing the back office essentials, they free up agency leaders and their leadership team to focus on strategy, growth, and clients. An agency that works with them told us, Agency Point gave me back 10 hours a week. And now I spend that time building my business, knowing the foundation is solid. If you're looking for a trusted partner who can help lighten the load without competing for your strategy seat, check out Agency Point.
Your value is based on the profitability of your agency. So at any given year, you might choose to make some big investments in the agency that would suppress your profitability in that particular year.
Welcome to the Insurance Refocused podcast, where we're highlighting real agent stories and how they are innovating to respond to the changes and challenges happening in the independent insurance industry. My name's Lindsay, and I can't wait to introduce you to my amazing co-host, who just so happens to be my mom, Carey Wallace. Mom, how you doing today?
I am doing okay, Lindsay. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I am in beautiful Savannah for the Big I Marketing Summit this week, which is really nice. I guess when this comes out, I was there last week. But it's fun to be around a bunch of innovative marketing people who are all trying to help each other be better.
Shout out to Georgia. Actually, both of us are kicking off our travel for 2026 in the beautiful state of Georgia. I'm going to head there. I'm headed to the Athens area to be with SNA next week. So I guess when this podcast comes out, I will be sitting in beautiful Athens, Georgia. So shout out to the Georgians. Is that a word? I'm not even sure. Anyway, yeah. So, I'm glad that we are in 2026. It's absolutely beautiful, and glad to be out and around some agents and some, thought leaders in the industry. So tell me, I know that you're doing the marketing summit. Is there anything super exciting there? Is anything happening with that summit that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, there's actually a speaker that I'm really excited to see. He wrote the book Crucial Conversations, I believe, but he also wrote a book, and this is going to make me laugh. The name of the book is The Cure for Stupidity. And
nice. There's a cure. I mean, do tell.
Apparently, and he is speaking tomorrow morning, I believe. So I'm gonna make sure I sit in on that session. But I've been listening to the audiobook, and it's really good. It's a lot about like communications. Like, it's very similar to Crucial Conversations. So I'm excited to see him in person. I'm going to try to get him to come on the podcast. We'll see what we can do.
For sure. Sounds like a great book for our team to do it together. Maybe listen, the title's catchy. I'll tell you that. Like, it definitely
the title is catchy.
So that's great.
Yeah. Well, so we just obviously wrapped up end of year, and end of year always comes with a lot of questions and interest from agencies on internal perpetuation, because it's not one of those things that needs as much work it's not one of those things that agencies think need as much work as an external transition. But they can be complex, trying to figure out how to sell an agency internally and what the discounts look like, what the structure looks like. And they're all different, right? So I just wanted to get on and talk about what we've seen in ones that go well, what we've seen in ones that don't go well, and what we've learned by helping a couple agencies go through that process.
Yeah, that's a great thing. I'm glad that you didn't leave with the impression that internal is not as, doesn't take as much work as an external sale, because that's actually not true. All transitions of ownership inside an agency take a pretty significant amount of work if you want to do it well. Um, but there are some differences between internal and external. Just because it is people who are already part of the organization that are taking over leadership in that agency. So, but I would not at all say that one takes less or more work than the other. I think the work is different. And oftentimes an internal transition becomes complex or um, becomes a challenge because it's easy to put off. Like
Mm-hmm.
in an external sale, there's a date certain. There are typically external people involved in that process. There is um, someone else helping you go through all of the details of what's going to happen, because it's moving from one entity to another, one team to another. Like, you have to change codes, you have to change bank accounts, you have to change all those things, create urgency and finality. Where in an internal, I think one of the biggest challenges is it doesn't have to happen. So therefore it can get drug out over time. It sometimes doesn't have external guidance. So it can go past the time when it should and therefore become very difficult to actually implement. So I think the nature of it actually creates some complexity and some challenges to make an internal transaction happen. I'm not saying there aren't agreements and there aren't things that have to transfer and, but they're fewer. It's not like going from one entity to another. Does that make sense
Yeah.
to you?
Yeah, totally makes sense. I mean, and I also think that there's not one right way to do it, right?
Yeah.
There are multiple different ways that you can do it. You can be an owner held note, it can be a bank held note, it could be discounted at any infinity number of options and opportunities. I've even heard agencies that for tax purposes, they don't even actually pay person to person, right? They do it through rent if the previous owner owns the building. Like there's so many different creative ways you can do it. Um, and the structures are all kind of all over the place.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning. When we're talking about an internal transition, it typically means um, from one owner to another, from a parent to a child, from an owner to a key person inside the agency that doesn't yet have ownership. And that process is, number one, you got to identify, is that person ready, willing, and able to take on ownership of the agency. And ownership is financial responsibility, right? Like you have to value what the agency is, determine what percentage of the agency they're going to either purchase or be gifted or et cetera. So we got to start with what's the value of the entity. And then that person that you've identified can determine, am I willing to take on that financial burden in order to become an owner in this agency? That's one part of the process.
Mhm.
Second part of the process, in order to get that answer, is what kinds of hiring or what kind of resources might we need to move that key person into an ownership role and have the current owner exit or it maybe reduce their role? Does that create a gap in the agency? And are there hiring needs in order to ensure that the agency can continue to operate and support um, the the note that will be created for the succeeding, for the future owner to pay the exiting owner? So
Mhm.
it really is about what's the compensation of the exiting owner and the role of that exiting owner? What's the compensation and role of the future owner? And are there any other resources we need to put in place in order to make sure that the agency continues to operate. So the last thing you want to do is take your key producer, move them into an ownership role, have them stop producing, and now they're managing human resource needs, they're managing carrier leads, they're managing operational things inside the agency, and we've counted on their production as future performance of the agency. And the next thing you know, the agency performance declines. We didn't contemplate that, and they can't pay the note to the exiting owner. Like, that is
Yeah.
not a good thing. So it's really puzzle pieces, if you think about it, of how do you put this together? And do all of those people have reasonable expectations? And do they have a good enough open communication to really work through what that is? So oftentimes the responsibility starts to transition before the actual ownership does, where you can work through that dynamic and really think that through. It can be oftentimes it's many years process in order to have a successful internal transition occur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely makes sense. And we've seen it that there are areas of strength that the current owner has, that the incoming owner doesn't have. We get actually a lot of fractional CFO clients that way, right? The incoming owner is really good at sales and operations, but the finances, they're like, you know what? I need an expert for this. And so we step in as fractional CFO and help them with the finances, and even, coaching them up and teaching them along the way. Here's how you look at this. Here's what this means. And honestly, I think sometimes it's just as influential to the outgoing owner when they're involved in that. They learn just as much as the incoming owner does in that process as well.
It's funny you say that, because it really is about having a sounding board. And really, this is doing an internal transition. There is a science to it, but there's also an art to it. Like, the reality is, if I went to our team today and I said, if I wasn't here, which one of you would take on the responsibilities of my role? And what would you need in order to make that happen? Well, here's the reality. They don't know what I do day to day. We are all remote. They do not sit at my desk and know exactly what I do all day. So there's the problem number one. Problem number two is the time it takes me to do it versus someone else who does it a different way can be vastly different. I've been doing this for 3 decades, and some of them have not. So we might have a misperception of what it takes for someone else to do it in a different way. Conversely, they might have a way more efficient way of doing things that I had never ever learned. You know what I mean? Like, you have to understand that this is a guide, not a set. Here's all the things, and this applies equally to everyone across the board. You can have an owner that is really masterful of becoming the visionary of the agency, but really not involved on a day-to-day basis on the operation of the agency. Those are actually the easiest owners to replace, because day to day, they could still advise from a vision standpoint to the future owner for a very long time, but it doesn't actually put a burden on the P&L from a cost standpoint in the same way of having to hire someone to handle their production or their operational role, et cetera. If that's all been delegated over a period of time, that's actually the best scenario for an internal transition.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked a bit about transferring responsibility,
Yep.
right? But now when it comes to actually transferring ownership,
Yep.
and again, just for all the listeners out there, we are not lawyers. This is not legal advice, right? What are ways that you've seen that go well, and what are ways that we've seen that go really south?
Yeah. So I think number one, start with a baseline. What's the value of an agency? And if you're talking about an internal transaction or transition, get the value of your agency as you're working through that transition. So most of the agencies that we work with that are doing an internal transition do annual evaluations. And the reason is they might transfer a portion of stock every year, or they might be valuing the agency leading up to this transition. Because, but just think about this, your value is based on the profitability of your agency. So at any given year, you might choose to make some big investments in the agency that would suppress your profitability in that particular year. You might try a new marketing strategy. You might think about a new technology, testing it out. So you want to make sure that you have a good track record of what the average value of the agency is. And for an internal transition, oftentimes this person that you're transitioning ownership to is part of the success of your agency, a huge part of the agency. So the exiting owner might decide, I'm going to discount the agency or use the value of the agency from a prior year as my guide, because I want to acknowledge that the value wouldn't be where it is without this person's participation in the agency. I'm not saying
Yeah.
all do, but that is a very common practice to think about, because if I'm a key performer in an agency and I aspire to be the future owner, you will eventually ask yourself, do I want to continue to build up the value of something just to be able to buy it back? Or do I want to be able to start that purchase at a reasonable time? So you have to be able to have a push-pull on that conversation to make sure that it's a win-win-win. And what I mean by that, it's a win for the exiting owner, it's a win for the incoming owner, but it's also a win for the agency, and we don't put undue burden on the agency to skew that decision. So you might discount the agency, you might use a prior year, you might gift some shares. You might say, hey, listen, I acknowledge that you've been a huge contributor in the agency, so I'm going to gift stock, or I'm going to gift a portion of stock over a period of time, and then the rest will be a purchase. So all of that requires the agency is valued, number one. Number two, there are IRS guidelines about how much an agency can, or an agency owner can gift each year. There's also a lifetime gifting threshold that you need to make sure of. So that includes all of your assets, not just your agency. So again, these are things, if you're thinking about it, the key people you need to make sure you have as your team of advisors as you're thinking through this process is, number one, you need someone to value the agency. And I highly recommend, do not use someone who values every kind of entity out there as your valuation resource. They do not understand independent insurance agents, and they may apply valuation approaches that do not make sense for your business. So can't even tell you how many times we have someone reach out to us and say, my local accountant or my local whoever did a valuation. Can you take a look at this and tell me if it's reasonable? And it never is. So make sure you're using someone who understands your business. Number one. So you need,
a good example of what you just talked about with locking the price on a prior year and having the incoming agency owner really be a part of the growth. We did a case study last year. I don't know if you remember this, but we did a case study for Callahan and Rice, which is an agency out of North Carolina. Happy to link this in the show notes for anyone who wants to review. But Landon was the incoming owner. He is now officially the owner of Callahan and Rice. And they decided to lock the price. I think it was 3 years in advance before they wanted to actually make the transition, while he was stepping up into ownership, because he had helped the agency grow so much. And it really does get to a point where if you're an incoming owner, right, you're sitting there thinking to yourself, well, wait a second, all of this work I'm doing is increasing the value, and I'm going to have to pay for this increased value. What am I doing? Why would I continue working and doing good work? So that's a really good example of like a real world. I co-wrote it with Landon himself. So we wrote it as if, we were giving advice and writing a guide for here's how I did it. Here's a similar way that you could think of it. And I'm really glad at how their transition turned out.
Yeah, for sure. And what's funny is we actually, there's so much information out there about external sales. What are the multiples? Who are the buyers? What are this? Blah, blah, blah. Last year we had, in 2025, the start of 2025, I think we had 4 fractional CFO clients that transitioned ownership internally, which is, it's, nobody talks about it. I guess it's not as sexy as an external sale and external multiples, which is kind of funny to me because I think it's a huge success when you have that happen. So before we get off of it, I want to make sure, number one, the resources you need to put in place if you're thinking about an internal transition. Have someone value your agency, number one. You also need someone to do the analysis to say, what are all the moving parts that are specific to your transition? What's the compensation adjustments? What are the benefits adjustments? What are the hiring needs, et cetera? So you have to have evaluation and then the analysis that is your actual assumptions for the incoming buyer or incoming owner and the exiting owner. Number 2, you absolutely need a lawyer that understands your business, that can write this agreement, help you mitigate risk if there's risk involved, write the roles of the understanding of the roles and the responsibilities through the process, et cetera. If you happen to have a large risk client that has, 30 plus years worked with this owner and the owner is going to exit, it's not unusual to have a price based on everything else and then carve out those customers that might be at risk to protect the incoming owner from not buying an agency and, 6 months later or 6 days later having big accounts leave because those relationships are so strong. So make sure you structure the deal in a way that makes the most sense. And so we need valuation. We need a lawyer. We need a tax advisor on both sides. What are the tax implications of this purchase and this transition? What are my gifting opportunities? You need someone who understands the ins and outs of all of the different structures that you could be contemplating and be able to look at it from the exiting owner's perspective, the incoming owner's perspective, and the agency's perspective. So those key people are really important. The last one I would say is oftentimes you might need a lender in that process as well. So make sure you surround yourself with people that understand your business and you don't go just to a local bank because you might get information. You will more likely get information that is wrong because they don't understand, again, that the value of an independent agency is on their book of business, not on their balance sheet. And they might underlend to you and it might slow down your process. So you want to make sure you have a very strong team of people supporting you and taking some of the emotion out of this. Oftentimes internal is a familial transition. And listen, it's very easy to have emotions drive a decision rather than reality driving or, the things you have to ask. So they can ask it on your behalf for both sides to make this process far more productive than what it may be if you're trying to go it alone.
Mm-hmm.
So,
absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that is a good short little overview. We have some additional resources to link definitely in the show notes, and we will get those to you guys. But if you have any questions, reach out to us. We would love to help if your agency is internally transitioning in 2026, 2027, or even planning for 2028. Wow, I can't believe 2028 is really only 2 years away from now. That seems
crazy.
Like the Jetsons type future year. But we're happy to help. Please reach out to us. Lindsay at agency-focus.com. That's Lindsay with an A, LINDSAY at agency-focus.com. We'd love to help out. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Insurance Refocused podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a review so you'll never miss us. Want to learn more about how Agency Focus can help you grow your agency? head to agency-focus.com or email Carey directly at carey@agency-focus.com. If you need to get in touch with me, feel free to shoot me an email at lindsay@agency-focus.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.